So anyway, welcome. I'm so excited to be given the opportunity to present this webinar on baking. I love to bake. I love to bake for myself, my family, my friends. And at this time of year, when we're preparing for so many various different celebrations and holidays, it's the time to start thinking about baking. The first thing I really want to talk about is alternative flours. I know you already know what white flour looks like, so I'm not really going to show you what that looks like, but we're going to talk about alternative flours because there are so many healthier options out there for pre-diabetes. Now, obviously, as we're baking, and we're baking for celebration, and we're baking for family and friends, we don't want to sacrifice taste and flavor. Through the years, as I have been experimenting with different recipes, my kids, I have 3 older boys, and they would come through and they'd be like, oh, is this a pre-diabetic recipe? So they were a really good indication for me if something went over well and something didn't go over well. I had a Thanksgiving failure last year with my pumpkin pie. I was trying so hard to make it healthy that it lost taste. So I don't want that to happen to you. However, I do want to give you permission to fail. That's what this is all about. And the fact that you're attending this webinar means that you already like to bake, or at least have some interest in this. So I'm very experimental in the kitchen. I'm not a strict recipe follower. However, I use many, many recipes as my baseline, and I am not afraid to alternate, try something, or swap it. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. So like I said, I want to give you permission to swap it up, change it up, mix it up, and have some failures. Another thing that you could do is, if you want to try to practice some things, is especially with a cookie. A lot of times, well, like last night when I was trying a cookie recipe for today, I only made a quarter of the recipe. So, because there's nobody else really here, my kids are gone, it's just me and my husband, and I don't want a lot of cookies lying around. But also I was experimenting. So if I fail, I'm not failing on a grand scale, I'm failing on a smaller scale. So let's talk about flours. There's tons and tons of options out there. I think mostly you need to decide what flavors you like, or if you're gluten-free, if you're looking for gluten-free options. There are plant-based and nut-based flours. The #1 alternative flour actually is coconut flour. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, or if you've ever used it. It is grain-free and gluten-free. So they list that as the #1 alternative. So it's going to have some healthier nutritions. It's a good source of protein, fat, fiber, and minerals like iron and potassium. So not only is it going to have a few lower carbs, but it's going to be actually a healthy alternative. The second best is almond flour. Now, almond flour is my personal favorite, and it is what I tend to, it's my go-to. I like the flour, I like the taste, and I like the texture. Now, I use almond meal instead of almond flour. Almond flour tends to be a little grainy, a little dry. So when I'm using it for my pie crust, and actually I have, this is a ball right here, that's a mixture of white flour and almond meal. So that's my go-to. Quinoa flour is the third alternative, buckwheat, and then the fifth is whole wheat. Now there's, I mean, dozens and dozens of other alternatives. Pistachio, chickpea would be a plant-based. So you could go, like I said, you could try different nut-based, you could try different plant-based, again, according to your taste. I saw that there was like kale. Now those, I mean, I haven't ventured out that far. Now whole wheat, you might think of that as kind of being similar to white flour, but it is actually made by grinding the entire wheat kernel into a powder, where the white flour strips all the nutrients out. The whole wheat flour keeps some of those nutrients there. So that's why that's ranked number 5. Me personally, I do have wheat flour. In fact, I have a lot of wheat flour, but I don't necessarily like it as well as the almond flour. Actually, I forgot. Hold on just 1 second. I'm going to grab something out of my refrigerator. All right, I made a whole wheat flour pie crust. And actually, I was very pleasantly surprised. Now, it had, let me find my recipe. It actually had some awesome substitutes. It used, well, here it is. This was a recipe I actually found from Eating Well magazine. So it has both a little mix of the wheat flour and the white flour. It has butter and it not applesauce. It had an alternative of Greek yogurt, which ended up blending very well. So, and it didn't crumble at all when I rolled it. It was a little sticky. I had to use a spatula to kind of, but it didn't fall apart. So I was actually very, very pleased with the way this turned out. If you like to make your own crust, which I do. But with that being said, whole wheat has like this very distinct flavor. So you may want to think about what you would put into this. If you were using like a chocolate, I just don't think chocolate with the whole wheat crust would go very well. Maybe pumpkin, maybe if you were making a pumpkin pie, that would be okay. Again, that wouldn't be my choice. I would use my almond flour crust. I've used the almond flour crust for both like a pumpkin pie, and it's gone really well with fruit pies. My family loves blueberry, and that is probably my best, healthiest alternative pie that my family devours. So again, hit or miss, lots of practice, knowing what your family and your friends, the flavors that they like, and that kind of gives you a base. So that was my whole wheat. So now this is my almond. Now, another thing I want to point out is I'm talking about healthy alternatives, but we're still talking about a pie. We're still talking about a dessert. We're still talking about calories. That particular crust had butter in it. This particular crust has Crisco shortening in it. So we're talking about added fat. So we're not saying that this is going to be perfect, but it is a nutritional swap that you can balance into your healthy lifestyle and especially if you're preparing for Thanksgiving, something that you can balance into your day. I need to keep an eye on the time. So I was going to roll this out to kind of show you that I've already rolled this in a little bit of white flour to keep it from being so sticky. But I was going to demonstrate, and I think I'll move on, but this is more crumbly. I have at times literally pieced it together. When I've rolled it out, it tends to break apart because the almond flour is just drier. Even though you can see I've made this pretty moist. but it does tend to break apart when I roll it. So I've kind of pieced it together, but I figure if I'm going to throw things in it, you're not going to see that my pie crust looks like a puzzle piece, but that's kind of what it looks like sometimes. All right. So with that said, I didn't mention oat flour, but I use a lot of oat flour, especially in cookies, because I tend to use, I love oatmeal. And if you like oatmeal in your cookies, it's already a perfect alternative. Now, this is just regular oatmeal that I would eat for breakfast. This is Kroger brand. So you can see I get it local. It's just old fashioned 100% whole grain oats. And you can see that they're a little seedy because they're kind of the whole grain. Now I put mine in, oh, like I said, I've got so much stuff here. I put mine in my, can you see that? My food grinder. And I made it into my own flour. And I don't know if you can see that. See that? Compared to, this is the whole grain. So you can do that for recipes. This is the almond meal versus the almond flour. I have cooked with the flour, baked with the flour before, but I prefer the meal because again, I feel like it's, you can kind of see it's, see how it kind of sticks together. It just seems like it works better for me. Now, let's talk about sugar. Again, sugar is still sugar, but there are healthier alternatives than just plain white granulated sugar. So I prefer, when I'm baking a cookie, I prefer coconut sugar. It's very dark. So I wouldn't use this to make like a Christmas cookie, sugar cutout cookie, because it's going to change the color. This is an example of the cookies that I made last night. Oops, you can't see this camera. And you can see they turned out dark. Now I used 3 different flours in here because I was really experimenting. I was going to town on this cookie. I have almond, I have oat, and I have, what else would I have in here? Oh, and whole wheat. So there's 3 different flours in here. And then I have coconut sugar in here, which really darkens this up. But the whole wheat, as you saw in my pie crust, is going to darken it up as well. There's a lot of other alternatives. The sugar substitute, agave syrup. Now that's going to be like a liquid, but you would go 1 cup sugar to 2/3 cup syrup. The coconut sugar is more of a 1-to-1 substitute. So if I'm baking it in a cookie, that's just 1-to-1. Honey, 1 cup sugar would be 3/4 cups of honey, and maple syrup is 1 cup sugar to 3/4 cups of syrup. Now, this is Massachusetts syrup. My brother happens to tap his own trees, and so he makes his own syrup, and he sells them at flea markets. So this is like the real deal, versus like the more of the processed syrup that you would buy like at the grocery store. So I look for a healthier. I also have maple sugar that he's made as well. So this is the syrup that's just all the water is taken out. Another way to sweeten when you bake is using spices. I love vanilla, pure vanilla, the Mexican vanilla, and then this is just McCormick vanilla. I tend to use my Mexican vanilla a lot. It's a very nice, strong flavor. Again, I like almond, so the pure almond extract as well. But I also use a lot of cinnamon and a lot of nutmeg, and that seems to add sweetener to my baking as well. So those are some great things that you could add into something that would make sense, like a cookie or a banana nut bread or something like that. You could add some cinnamon to that. If you want to reduce your sugar, this is where I messed up last year on my pumpkin pie. I thought I knew better than the experts on cooking. No. And the rule of thumb is if you want to reduce your sugar in a recipe up to no more than a third, will not make a difference. If you go past a third, like if you reduce it to say like a half, that's when you're going to notice. And that's exactly what I did. I thought it's pumpkin pie, the flavor of the pumpkin. And I pumped up the spice, the allspice and the cinnamon, the nutmeg. And I thought that would win it over, but I reduced it by half. And it really, truly was a fail. I also had used more almond flour. I mix the almond flour with the white flour now because the almond flour again is just so crumbly. So the whole pie was just a crumbly, not taste worthy. I was the only one that ended up eating it, if that tells you anything. So hopefully you'll learn from me. So if you want to reduce your sugar, reduce it no more than 1/3. So if it calls for 1 cup, just reduce it to 2/3. All right. Some other alternatives, which these are fun little tricks. This is an egg alternative. This is actually flaxseed meal mixed with water. And this has been sitting now for about 10-15 minutes. The recipe calls to sit for like 10 minutes to let that flaxseed. So it kind of has a texture of an egg. Can you see how it's kind of dripping? So to me, this would be a large egg, but this is 2 tablespoons of ground flax meal mixed with 3 tablespoons of cold water. And that is a 1 egg alternative. Another egg alternative would be a 1/4 cup of applesauce. And I use, again, Kroger brand, unsweetened, natural. And you could mix 1/4 applesauce with a little bit of baking powder, and that would be your egg alternative. Now, applesauce is also awesome as a butter substitute, which I did in my cookie recipe last night. So I did both the egg substitute and I did the butter substitute. So like I said, I went all out in this cookie. I had all these different flours. I chopped up my walnuts. I had an egg substitute and I had my butter substitute. So my butter substitute is 1/2 cup applesauce for every 1 cup butter. And we are getting close to, I'm going to open it up to questions. Let me see if I covered everything. Oh, one other thing I wanted to add. You might be able to see with this cookie, I did add some craisins. Again, because this time of year, it feels very festive. But I also added some white chocolate chips. Both of those very high in sugar. So I kind of took my healthy base of a cookie and I added a lot of sugar to it. So, but I did that more for show. If you, the chocolate chips that I try to look at labels. I feel like the fewer the ingredients, the better. This is the chocolate chips that I like. It's called Enjoy Life and they're dark and it only has 2 ingredients. Now it does have sugar in this, unsweetened chocolate and then cane sugar, but it's pure. There's no other ingredients such as like your Toll House semi-sweet is going to have, if you look at the ingredients, it's going to have lots and lots and lots of ingredients. Now, another thing I want to point out is I only cook with, bake with natural ingredients and natural foods. I do not use any substitutes like the Stevia and the Truvia. Stevia They both have these very distinct tastes to them. And if you start using them in larger quantities, such as if you're baking, it's going to have a very distinct taste. It also could have some side effects. Somebody might be sensitive to. Um, it could cause like digestional bloating, and even worse. So again, um, that's my personal choice that I stay away from sugar sweeteners. So I always am looking for um, food alternatives, healthier food options. So, all right, with that, I would love to open it up to anyone that has any questions.